Good morning, good
Good
afternoon,
morning.
good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Darian Wigfall, our guest today on Changes, Conversations Between Authors. And I am Sally Ember, EDD. We are both, believe it or not, in St. Louis, Missouri, USA, but we are not in the same room. The Hangouts on air live app. But if you are watching this later, you're watching it as a videotape on YouTube, or not a tape, but you know what I mean. And we're excited to have Darian on the show because for all of you listening and for me, this is one of the only times I get to have a local person on my show. People come in from all over the world, and Darian and I met at the St. Louis Indie Authors Book Fair, which happened last month, right, Darian?
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about you and tell everybody else too, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So as you said, my name is Darian Wigfall. I was born and raised in St. Louis. Been in and out of town for school, but decided to come back after school to pursue. Actually, I was pursuing a career in science at the time, but I really wanted to come back and just kind of add to whatever foundation in St. Louis as far as social justice and like community service that I could, because I noticed that I got a lot of mentoring as I was growing up. So I wanted to come back and do some mentoring myself. And so as you can probably see in my bio and some of the links on Sally's page, that I'm very socially active. So I did a lot of protesting in Ferguson, but I was an organizer even before that. And even through my books, I talk about political and social issues and things like that. And that's kind of led to a few other opportunities. I was in Fortune magazine earlier this year, and I'll be, if you're in St. Louis, I'll be at the Murmuration Festival talking about design and tech, and like how social justice gets involved with that as well.
Murmuration Festival, that's a new one. What is that?
Yeah, that is new. So one of the founders of LouFest, who has since left that team, is starting a new festival. And it's really about, so murmuration is like, if you ever watch birds in a flock flying and you see them moving in different patterns, that's a murmuration. So their idea is that people that are conscious or like kind of have a higher level of consciousness need to start following each other and working together in tandem so that we can make society a better place. And so that is what the festival is all about. It's going to be September 23rd through the 25th.
I hope you will put that up on our event page so everybody can find out about it that way. And I will definitely be happy to promote it. If you have a flyer or a banner or any kind of photo or something I can put with it, I'll put it everywhere. That is a really awesome concept, and I am going to try to go. I was thinking as you were talking about a murmuration of birds that are flying, that you can have an exaltation of larks.
Yeah.
Murmuration, or you could have a murder of crows or a gaggle of geese, right? So a covey of doves. I'm going through all these things because I've been sort of collecting collector nouns for a while, and I just love them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess as a writer, you're probably trying to expand your vocabulary constantly. I try.
I was really, yeah, I was always interested in words.
So yeah, how did you, I wanted to know how you got into being an author. Like, when did you write your first book, and like, how was that initiated or motivated?
Well, I was very encouraged even as a kid, and I won prizes for my writing when I was very young. So I guess I always thought of myself as a writer. I had my first pieces published in school newsletters and newspapers for camp, and I won a prize for the statewide Missouri Youth Rights Poetry Contest when I was in 10th grade, and an essay contest when I was in high school, and just other things that, I don't know, I just felt really encouraged, and I had great teachers at Ladue High School in St. Louis. Go Rams! And I had a lot of other encouragement over the years, and didn't write fiction books until a few years ago, but I wrote a lot of nonfiction and edited and co-wrote pieces in nonfiction for my work. Book already on Amazon that's been out since the mid-90s that I co-wrote with several people about using improvisational theater to help adolescents, pre-adolescents, and young adults better and work with social issues and community issues, and then help the community learn how to deal with those issues. Anything from addiction and suicide prevention and pregnancy postponement, violence, drug and alcohol problems, home problems, depression, all kinds of different issues that come up when you're a kid.
Wow.
Worked with was called Acting Out, so the book is called Acting Out, the workbook, and it's about using scene work, improvisational scene work, to use socio drama and even psychodrama and drama therapy, and then also art therapy and music therapy and other kinds of modalities to help educate and move along these young people so they stay with us, because the biggest issue we have now is keeping them alive.
Yeah, yeah, having them survive. That's interesting that you bring that up, because I know that now the new thing is for people to use improv as far as like an office setting, to be able to talk to your coworkers better, for like business leaders to be able to lead their teams better. But I really think that through mentoring, I understand now, and I'm kind of seeing in the research that the soft skills aren't really taught in school. And so that's what a lot of kids are missing, where that's like interpersonal relationship building, or just kind of noticing somebody's emotion when they're having it. I think those soft skills are built through improv, because you have to like read it and react to somebody else who may not be on the same page with you, but then you have to get on the same page with them. And that's, most conversations are like that. Any relationship is like that. And so that's really cool that you did something back then that now is being seen as something that builds those soft skills. That's really cool.
Oh, it's been around for decades. I mean, look at Paulo Freire and Theater of the Oppressed, you know, Boaz. A lot of people have been using it for social and political and educational purposes for over 100 years. It goes in cycles, you know, people remember and they forget, and they remember and they forget anything good. And I think that movie that Michael Moore just had come out a little while ago called Where to Invade Next brings that up perfectly, because his conclusion at the end of the whole movie, after going to all these countries that have great ideas that he wants to bring back to America, is from what they told him in these countries, most of these ideas originated in the United States. Using them, and other countries adopted them because they realized they were great, and we're idiots because we stopped doing it, and now we need to start doing it again. Everything from prisons to education to healthcare to social and political and other kinds of power sharing, just everything. We were better in some ways at different parts of our history than we are now. And so it isn't that I want to make America great again. Do not take that tagline out of this. No, because we have never been great.
Right.
But there are some things that were better that are not better. And when you just said what you said, Darian, it reminded me that the improv thing is yes and scene with that attitude. So whatever your partners or other people in the scene bring up, you don't argue, you don't go against it, you go with it.
Yeah, go.
Social activism, right? Yield and conquer.
Definitely. I saw, like, you know, power dynamics tend to crop up in any group of people, I think. But within the activist community, I can see that, you know, we kind of recreate the same systems over and over. And so my thing is always to just get in where I fit in, to just play the role that I need to play in that team, and then just kind of help the team win. And I know a lot of people are ego focused because we live in such a consumer society. So it's all about how can I make my life better by buying this thing or buying that thing or owning this thing. And so we kind of fall into that, oh, I need to be better, or I need to be up front, or I need to look better, things like that. And it started to tear the activist community apart in some places. It's kind of unfortunate, but I did see hope in the fact that there was, at least at first, a very tight-knit community when we were out in the street. It was like people feeding each other, people bringing each other water, allowing strangers into their house to eat or to rest or whatever it was. And that was just a beautiful thing. I'd never seen anything like that in my lifetime before.
Yeah, well, you're a lot younger than I am. So you weren't around for the civil rights movement, the women's second wave of feminism, the anti-war movement, the anti-nuclear power centers movement, all these different things that I grew up with, that I was part of. But it was like that. People were very much in collaboration and cooperation and taking care of each other and assuming the best instead of assuming the worst.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's part of that whole yes and idea, is just like assume the best first and let people, you know, do their thing. And if they show you that it's not what you thought it was, then, you know, you can readjust. But always come into it, thinking that people have the best intention.
Then I think that's a really good segue, and I'm going to do my little screen share here to show people your books and tell us how you decided to write them and why you wanted to bring in this positive characters for young Black people that live in St. Louis, for example, but could live anywhere. And what is it exactly that you think, from your point of view, like why are these books good for people? What do you like about them?
Well, the motivation behind the book series was actually a mentoring experience that I had over the course of 2007, 2008. I was working with a group called Urban Future, and we were at Fanning Middle School, which is actually down Grand from where I'm at now. And I was mentoring a young man named Earl Willis, and I noticed that he was a good kid. Like his grades were good, and his mom was on him about his grades, and she was a positive influence in his life and things like that. But as we all know, most of the time that children spend is outside the house. So with friends or with family and things like that. And his cousins were drinking. And I know that some of the students that were in Fanning were starting to get into drugs and things like that. And he was just having a hard time navigating that, even with the mentorship program. And once it was over, I kind of felt it was almost like a loss. So I was a little sad about that, and I felt like he was going to go on the right path, and he actually did finish high school. I run into him in St. Louis randomly every once in a while, and he'll talk about, you know, he's still studying music, or he wanted to be a chef at the time, but he was also into music, and he's been doing his music thing for a while. But I realized that I wasn't going to be able to reach a whole lot of people like him just by going to a mentoring program. And so whatever you believe in, whether it's God, the universe, Buddha, put it on my heart to write a book so that I could reach more kids like him, and really kind of tell my own story, because I was always, you know, around the popular people, but I wasn't so popular. And being that kid that's kind of in the middle, you find yourself trying to figure out which way should I go a lot. And without a good mentor, that's pretty hard. But the other thing is, through activism, I learned how powerful a story is and how people can connect to a story. And so I'm seeing now how strong of a piece of art that a book can be. And so that's really motivated me to continue the series. And since I'm a guy, I started with guys, of course, and also Earl was a young man, but I know that young Black girls go through similar situations. And so that was the reason that I started Not So Princess Jasmine, because when I was editing the first book, my illustrator's daughter read it, and she was saying that, well, why don't you have any girls in here? And I was just like, yeah, why don't I have any girls in there? And so Jasmine.
So your first book is called The Dying Breed, and your main character is a 10-year-old named Deshaun Henry. Your second book has a friend of his named Jasmine that comes in at the end of the first book, but now she gets her own book.
That's right. That's right.
Cool. And that's coming out when?
That should be out in August, maybe September at the latest, but should be out in August.
2016. Okay. And the whole series is the Bright Lights series, which we have on the screen. And I'm going to get rid of that now so we can see you again.
Cool. And
I'm interested in some of your advice about your books from one of your readers. That's a really great thing to do.
Yeah, I always think that I'm not always right. So like if people have an opinion or an idea, then I at least listen to it. And if it has merit, then, you know, I consider that. I really deeply consider that. And the girl that was helping us in this was 9 at the time. And she's really smart, super smart. And so her perception of what's going on in the world is a little bit stronger than most of the kids that I've met. And so I really took it to heart when she said that we needed a girl character. And so even with that, I asked her, you know, do you have an idea for a title? And Not So Princess Jasmine was what she came up with. So
well, I hope you give her credit and acknowledgments in the front of the book. That'll be awesome for her to see that. That's definitely really great.
Yeah, she'll get one of the first copies for sure.
You can find out more about you and your books on your website, which you have named after your series. And you want to spell that for people?
Yeah, that's the Bright Light series. That's BRIGHT. Second word is light. Lights, sorry, LIGHTS series, SERIES.
And so then the website is brightlightseries.com.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Great. And then you're also on Amazon and Goodreads and Barnes & Noble and all those good places. And you may expand with this next book into more places. And you have both ebooks and paperbacks?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I just moved into the paperbacks this fall. I only had ebooks for a couple of years, and then I made the move to create space in Amazon to put up my books. And I haven't had a lot of sales, but I hope people will buy them in the paperback version as well as the ebooks. And I made my first book free. Are you going to be doing anything like sales or giveaways or free for the first book once your second book comes out?
Definitely. I want to give away the second book free and make the first book half price when you get that first book, so that you can get both of them.
No, you just said that backwards, I think.
Okay.
What are you going to do?
So for the first 100 people that pre-order Not So Princess Jasmine, A Dying Breed will be also half price. So like you'll get Not So Princess Jasmine for free, but you can also get A Dying Breed for half price if you are one of the first 100 people.
Princess Jasmine's going to be free in the pre-order?
For the first 100 people, yeah.
Oh, wow, that's very cool. Okay, that's a great thing. So is that going to be promoted on your website and on all the social media that you use?
Yeah, so look for that kind of thing coming out June, July. I'm starting to put together the marketing program behind that. And if anybody wants to know a little bit more about how I'm marketing my book, please ask me, because like I feel like a lot of authors are trying to figure it out. And there's a little group of us that are trying to, add resources and add ideas to our arsenal so that everybody's book can do better. So I'm all about giving it. I don't want to hoard information at all. So like if you want to know how I'm marketing my book, please go to my website or find me on social media, and I'll gladly tell you what I'm doing as far as like getting word out.
That's great. Mm-hmm. And so you're on Twitter and you're at Darian, DARIAN_Wig, WIG.
Uh-huh.
And that's how people can see what you're tweeting. And then do you have the cross from Twitter to Facebook and other places around social media?
Through music marketing, I've at least been told by the experts that you shouldn't do that because it can seem disingenuous if you're just shooting out one to a bunch of people and a bunch of different platforms. So I try to post separately. Even if I'm posting about the same thing, I'll put something different on Facebook. Plus the Facebook has the added benefit that you can write in more than 140 characters. So I can say a little bit more on Facebook than I do on Twitter, but I try to post different things to different platforms.
Yeah, I know that's the conventional wisdom in some areas, but I've also seen other areas that say because all of your followers aren't the same, them to see what else you're posting and get to know if they want to follow you on those other platforms. So I do some of that. I do some of the cross posting, and I've never had a lot of people complain. Maybe one person complained, and maybe they don't like it. I don't know. But I have things on Pinterest. I put this series on Pinterest, and I have things on YouTube, obviously, and Google+, and then also on Facebook and on Goodreads. So those are the main places that I appear. And then, of course, on all the book sales sites that I could possibly be on. And then there's a lot that allow you to post if your book is free. Is on sale for a particular period of time and it's under a certain price, you can have a particular promotion sometimes for free or pay for it. So those happen too. And then you can also be in groups. Now, do you belong to any online communities like on Google+ or groups in Facebook or other Goodreads groups or anything?
I'm on some Facebook groups for authors, indie authors. I can't think of the names right now, but yeah, definitely Facebook. I don't use Google+ that much, but maybe I could get more into it now that I'm coming out with this book series. I think that would be beneficial. I want to ask you though, does Facebook do Facebook and Twitter allow you to cross post to like your Goodreads and all the other platforms that you were talking about?
What works is that I have a WordPress blog. Mm-hmm. And my WordPress blog lets me cross post to all those places, including Google+. That's the only one that lets me cross-post to everywhere that I'm on except for Pinterest. I have to do that by hand.
Okay.
But all the other ones will automatically come from my blog. So if I put something on my blog, it goes to Facebook, Google+, Goodreads, and Twitter.
Really?
And so that's really good for me because then that's just one post that goes a lot of places. And then I make a Pinterest board for a lot of different purposes, and one of them is just my blog posts.
Okay.
One of them is just this show. One of them is just the scenery and the locations I refer to or use in my Spanners series, science fiction books. One of them is the music that's referred to or used in the book series. One of them is all the different space and science concepts that I use. And so I have all these different boards on Pinterest that I've really enjoyed putting together. And then I also have indie authors and indie book promotion boards that I participate in. And then just personal stuff. Like I love pictures of really unusual animals and especially underwater birds that are just really colorful. So I have a whole board for that. And then I have something called Space Shots I Like. And it's just the Hubble telescope taking pictures and the Kepler telescope pictures and lots of other people that have posted diagrams and explanations of what the heck's going on out there in space. So I have a board for that. Yeah. And then I have a science board. I don't know, I have about 15 boards at this point, and I keep up with them somewhat. But I really like finding stuff that other people post and then putting it as a pin on mine because I appreciate that when people find stuff. So I think that's the collaborative nature. And I was on Triber for a while, but it was like that kind of tipped me over. It was like too much. Yeah. I couldn't cope. It was too many things to do. So I think I am still on Triber, but I don't know what's going on Triber.
So do you suggest that other authors use Pinterest as like a platform for their books and I guess other interests as well?
I think some people have really gotten a lot out of it. I can't really speak for other authors, but I do know that you either need to be on Pinterest or Instagram if you want a place for people to find a lot of images that you find related to your brand, to your writing, to your life that you want people to see. Now, if all you want is personal stuff and you know your family pictures and your what you ate for lunch and the selfie of you and your girlfriend, then I don't think it matters and you can do whatever you want. Because that's not really author marketing. That's just your life.
Yeah.
Separate page from my Spanners series, and then I have my personal Facebook page. But my personal Facebook page is me with my family and my profession. I don't separate them, especially because I don't put anything super private up there.
I like that, and I think people should get a full picture of who you are when they get to see your social media. It shouldn't. I mean, it's curated. It's obviously curated, but like, you know, you should, be a real person on social media too. Don't just post. And I tell the musicians that I manage, like, don't just post about your shows. Like, actually post your thoughts and post things that like are of interest to you. Because like people want to know who you are more than just they want to listen to your music. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's like 5 topic areas that I really love to post about: science, especially physics and that, health, politics and social change, feminism among them, right? And just really interesting things that I find that I think are really cool about whatever. And then I also post about my books and other people's stuff and my show and my life occasionally. But again, nothing super private.
Yeah. Your social media imprint can make a big difference in like getting jobs or getting booked for things. So like, yeah, it's a really good idea to keep the private stuff.
Yeah, private. People do need to be careful. And then that brings up a really important point, which is, you know, people ask us as authors, where do you get your ideas? How much of this is about you? Did you grow up on the streets, Darian? Were you jumped into a gang or your older siblings? Did you have to deal with drugs and alcohol? And was your father gone? And so then how do you deal with people who ask you all these really personal questions? Do you answer them?
Typically, I'm pretty much an open book, like you said you are earlier. I don't have a whole lot of things that I wouldn't talk about because I feel like if something that happened to me can help somebody else in the same situation, then I might as well just talk about it. I mean, it might be embarrassing at first, but most of the time when you tell people something private, unless they're just like one of those type of people that will take it and run with it, in a negative way, then you know they're understanding and kind of find a way to relate to that situation, even if they didn't go through it. But a lot of times, if they're asking about it, they probably either know somebody or have gone through it or something like that. With this book, I was never jumped into a gang, but like even growing up with the deseg program here, that's desegregation for people who are from St. Louis and from the 80s, I guess. Where they bust city kids, mostly black, to the county to go to the county schools. I met a lot of kids that were getting jumped into gangs. I had a friend in 8th grade, well, actually in 7th grade, who got shot point blank with a sawed-off shotgun and
Ugh.
lived to tell about it. So he came back to school 2 years later. I'm sure that was a long recovery, but he was, before that happened, I remember him getting jumped into the crypts and like him telling me about that experience. And it was just like, I knew he was joining it for safety. He wanted to be safe from the Bloods that were in his neighborhood. But like, sometimes you get into that to be cool and things like that. And I wanted to kind of address that in the book to show that that's like a short-term fix and that doesn't lead to anything but devastation usually. And to show a character that was tempted but didn't actually go that route in A Dying Breed. And then there's other issues that I will speak on in the rest of the series, like teen pregnancy and domestic violence, things like that. Actually, in the next book, Dying Breed Volume 2, I'll be talking about the prison industrial complex and the school to prison pipeline and things like that.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that you're putting that in your books, because it is very much not in the public discussion yet. It's something that I know a lot about because of the work that I do with nonprofits and mentoring and youth development programs, and particularly in California, it's been a very big topic among politics and social activists and educators. But most people, you say something like the school to prison pipeline, they don't know what you're talking about. They say, oh, you mean the oil pipeline? Like, they don't know what you're talking about. Do you want to explain for people for whom that is a new phrase what you mean?
Sure. And it's
by that?
Yeah, I think it's especially important in Missouri because I just read a statistic that said that Black boys in Missouri are punished at like 6 to 1, or punished 6 times more than their white counterparts in elementary school. And so that path is the path that leads to prison, because when you're suspended and you're out of school, you have nothing but time, and usually your parents aren't home during the day, so you can get into anything you want to. And kids being out on the street usually leads to at least some kind of misdemeanor, some kind of crime where they did something that was interesting at the time, but was completely illegal. And so they ended up in the system, juvenile system, just being detained, and then that starts their record. And from that point on, they are put through, I guess, really the juvenile detention system kind of circles them back around. Even when they come out, they're monitored and things like that, that kind of give them an edge. So they really want to, it's kind of this mentality where you think I'm a thug, okay, I'll give you the thug. And so they go into this process of, I'm gonna, prove my my street credibility or my ability to survive. So I might kill somebody, or I might steal something, or something like that. And this is later in the teen years when they can actually go to prison. And so that suspension in elementary school leads to a place where their behavior has been criminalized over time just by being out and in the street and doing things that normal kids do, but like maybe they get caught or somebody tells them.
Yeah, it's so awful. Like if a kid from an upper class or white looking family climbs over a fence and takes a swim in a pool that's not theirs, they get a little slap on the wrist and say, go home, don't do it again. If a kid from a lower income family, especially if they look Black or Muslim, does something like that, they go to juvenile detention. They get arrested, they go to court, they get a record. Act behavior.
Yeah, the same behavior, but it's the bias.
So that's just horrible.
Yeah.
And I read another statistic about 6 years ago when I was still working in this area in California, that the private industry looks at statistics from public schools from 3rd grade to see who are the kids that are getting into trouble, getting suspended, getting detention, getting expelled. If you can believe they expel 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, it's horrible. And then that is how they know how many beds to build their prisons for.
Wow.
12 years later.
That's insane.
Horrible.
Yeah.
But they've got all these, like, what do you call these, actuarial tables to show that is how they know who's going to be arrested, who's going to end up in prison, whether it's short-term or long-term. Like, they can make all these projections because of racism and the bad educational reaction to ordinary, typical behavior, and how they overreact, especially if it's a person of minority or low-income background and looks like they're not white.
Yep. If you're
And
not white.
I say that very particularly. You and I were talking offline before about the social construction of race, the non-biological basis for ethnic backgrounds, and how a lot of people don't understand that, and they don't know that it's a big myth, and we have to deal with it as a fact, even though it isn't. And we all know that it has to do with how you look and not who you are.
Yep.
Assumptions people make.
Skin color. Yeah, just purely based on your skin color.
And what kind of car you're in, if you happen to be in one, what kind of clothes you're wearing,
Yeah.
who you're hanging out with, where you happen to be.
Mm-hmm.
All those different things create a whole cascade of assumptions that are either going to go against you or be in your favor, depending on who it is that's making the assumptions, right?
Yeah.
So I had to tell you this story because it's kind of poignant and it's very St. Louis.
Okay.
I was going out early before my work. I do some daycare work, and it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. I went to the bagel factory on Olive, yay, bagel factory, to get my pre-ordered bagels that I love called Smashes, which are these smashed down sesame bagels that are just the best. And they're the only place you can get them, by the way. Only on Wednesdays, just letting you know.
They should pay you.
And you better pre-order because they go fast. Anyway, so I went to get those, and as I'm leaving, I hear this big, and I see this car veering off and then going off the road because it just got a flat tire. And it was right in front of me, right? So I pull up behind to see, like, you know, can I help? What's going on? And an African-American woman was driving, and she was just like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And I said, well, here's the deal. First of all, let's get you off of this intersection because you were right in front of a street that was coming into Olive. So we pulled her over a little bit. And then I said, okay, let's call, who can you call? And it turned out she didn't even have AAA or anything like that. But she had some people she could call. And meanwhile, a police car pulled up.
Okay.
I said, let me talk. And she looked at me and she goes, well, why? And I said, because I look like this and you look like that. And she goes, thank you.
Yeah.
And that was all we had to say. So I just went over and I talked to the police officer because he was all ready to get out with his billy club and yell at her just because she was black and her car was pulled over where he didn't want it. Right between them, I'm only 5 feet tall, by the way, but I just walked up right between them and I said, good morning, officer. Let me tell you what's happening here so you could help.
Yeah.
Right?
Framing.
So then it was a whole different experience, right? And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. You know, because I'm this educated white woman, he's going to be nice to me. So then this whole thing unfolded very differently than if I had just driven away.
Yeah, if she would have been there by herself, it would have been a totally different situation.
She had no money. She didn't have AAA. Her cell phone was dead. What was she going to do?
Man.
Right? I mean, they would have hauled her away, left her car there. It would have been towed. She couldn't have paid for it. That would have been a cascade of income problems. She was on her way to work. She couldn't get to work, on and on and on. And this is what happens in St. Louis, as you know.
Yeah.
Where they have these little jurisdictions, and you can go for a mile with a broken taillight, get a ticket, go another mile, and get a ticket in a different city.
Yeah.
Go another mile, get a different in a distance. And they do this. They were doing this for years, right? Mostly to black people. And then they send them to court, and then they tell them the wrong day or the wrong time or the wrong place. So they miss their court appearance, and then they get fined or taken to jail. And it was not their fault. On and on and on. And it's just horrifying what they were doing. And then the prosecutor in one district is the judge in another. So they're all just buddies with each other and just doing whatever the heck they want, right?
Yeah.
Break windows, right?
It's just like, how is that not a conflict of interest? I don't understand how that's legal for them to be a judge in one place and a lawyer in another place and like a counsel in another place. It's just, it's just like you have this system of just a few people that are kind of controlling the whole law enforcement from, you know, the judge, the judicial branch of that part. So.
Yeah, it's not funny, but it reminds me of the Lucy Show episode where they go to this very small town in a rural area and there's only two people there, a man and a woman who are both white. And every time they ask for somebody, they just go off and put on a different hat and come back and go, oh, I'm the sheriff. Peace. Oh, I'm the this, I'm the that. And it's just one or the other of them for everything.
It totally is like that. You mentioned the pulling over, and I had like, so I have a story, I guess I can tell that's like the opposite, but I felt that what she was feeling in that moment. So like when I bought my first car, the gas pump was bad. So I was on the highway. I was actually going on 270 and was about to pass the Ladue exit. and it just conked out. And luckily there was no traffic there, and I could pull over. And when I pulled over, a cop pulled up behind me, and I was like, uh-oh, here we go. And he ended up helping me out. He called the tow truck and things like that, and made sure that the tow truck got there before he left and things like that. But that is definitely not the typical situation.
Was he white appearing?
He was white appearing, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And why do you think he was nice to you?
I think that, okay, so I guess, you know, as a black man in St. Louis and really in the country, I've kind of developed a way of dealing with the police that my mom taught me, but like I've adapted to like the actual situation. So one of the things I typically do is humanize myself and talk about some either pain or joy, kind of slide it in there somehow so that they realize that I'm a person too. For instance, we were doing a show in Cape Girardeau a couple of years ago, and I had a car rental, and it was me in the front, a young white man, and two young black men in the back seat, and we got pulled over, and it was for no reason because I was driving, you know, the speed limit, wasn't doing anything erratic, but he claimed that my back lights were out, but my front lights were on, and the lights were automatic, so I knew that that was not what was really going on. And so I stepped out, and his lights were still on. And I was like, man, how do you deal with those lights without getting like a seizure or something? And like kind of made that little joke about like, oh, these are bright for me, just like they're bright for you. And then he answered. And then from there, he kind of like de-escalated from where he was. Cause like when he first pulled me over, he was like, have you been drinking? Are you have any drugs in the car? Do you have any weapons? And I was like, no, sir, no, sir, no, sir. And he's like, can you step out of the car? And I was like, oh no, I can't get arrested in Cape Girardeau. But like, that thing about humanizing myself in the moment typically gets me out of the situation unscathed. I've been pulled out of cars, but I've never been like arrested or anything for anything that I didn't do, obviously, and I haven't done anything to get arrested, so I don't have a record. But yeah, in those situations, I just find a way to try to relate to the officer in another way besides being an officer and being a citizen.
Good, very good advice. I hope people who need it can hear that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk with you about that we talked about beforehand, because you won't believe this, but it is almost a quarter of the hour. Wow. So we don't have a lot of time left. I'm kind of disappointed, right? So I wanted to ask you about the whole role of religion in your stories and maybe in your life, if you want to talk about it, and how you think that operates.
Sure. I included religion in the books because typically the black families are anchored by the church, whether it's the parents or the grandparents or someone that takes the children to church. And I grew up in the church that way. My parents took me to church every Sunday. From
which denomination were you involved with?
I was in a Baptist church. It was a church called First Baptist Church of Creve Coeur. And from like 6 years old through the end of high school, we were there pretty much every Sunday. And a lot of other days throughout the week, whether it was vacation Bible school or Bible study or something like that. And so I knew that.
Did they sing?
Yeah. I love the choir in the Baptist church. It's like one of my favorite things. Gospel music is it's just so inspiring. Like the tones that they use and like the melodies that they use, just like you can't help but feel better. Yeah. You can't help but feel better after listening to it. So
yeah.
I wanted to include that because I feel like that's a big part of black culture, even though young people aren't as involved in the church anymore in this day and age. I wanted to include that because I think that it shouldn't be lost. Even if we're not going to church, that part of black culture shouldn't be lost in a story about kids that are in the African-American cultural group.
I think some people still do. I think it depends on your family and your neighborhood and where you live and what's cool. Like when I was living in certain parts of California, there was literally a church or community church activity center going on every block of some neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And there were teenagers everywhere. And young kids and middle school kids. I mean,
that's good.
Everywhere.
That's good.
And I don't think they were all there because their families made them be there. Their friends were there. That's why they were there.
Yeah. Typically, you're following your friends at that age. So
hanging out. That's where they're allowed to hang out and they're safe.
Right.
And they can have fun and get some food and get out of the hot sun in California. Yeah. And do something cool for a while. Whatever they're doing. I don't know. I didn't go inside, but I could see them there.
So you brought up religion, and you talk about being Buddhist, and I kind of wanted to ask you, and we had talked about this before offline, how did you what was the path that kind of led you to Buddhism, even though you were raised in like a family that followed the Jewish faith?
Well, there's a whole category of people that did the same thing I did before I have done it and after, and we're called Jew-boos because there's so many of us.
Yeah, totally.
And some people, like, there was a whole book called The Jew in the Lotus that was written, I think, in the 80s about a man who went on a pilgrimage with a bunch of rabbis to go meet with the Dalai Lama. And he wrote a book about it, like, as a reporter. But he is also Jewish, this man. And the reason that all these Jews went to talk to the Dalai Lama, and he wanted to talk with all these rabbis, was that something called the diaspora. Do you know what that word means?
Sort of, in relation to the African diaspora, just like people from a certain place that are spread out into other places.
Exactly. So they get scattered, right? They're losing their culture, their community, because they've been taken, or they're refugees, or they're enslaved, or they're running away, or whatever. And so there's this diaspora, this exactly what you're saying, the spreading out of the people. Well, so of course we know that's happened with the Jews, most recently in Eastern Europe and Germany and all those places because of World War II activities before the war and after. And it also has happened with Tibet because of what happened with the Chinese invasion and horrible things they're still doing to the Tibetan people. So a lot of Tibetans, including the Dalai Lama, fled these in early 60s and continue to flee whenever they can. And so that diaspora of the Tibetan people is still going on. And so the Dalai Lama and his other counterparts, these other lamas and teachers and leaders, wanted to ask the Jewish people, how do you do it? How do you help your scattered people maintain their traditions, their culture, their language, their faith, their ways of thinking, and their values when they're not in the same area anymore? So you have this great talk about it. And so that's what that book was about. So that answers part of your question, which is just that for some reason, Jews and Buddhists go together really well. Lots of different Jewish leaders, and some of them maintain their Jewish faith and do both, because Buddhism, even though you called it a religion and a lot of people do, isn't actually a religion.
Really?
It's actually a mind training and a way of living, and it includes meditation and becoming a better person. But lots of Buddhists are also Christians or Jews or Muslims or whatever else they want to be, because it doesn't preclude that. For me, I never felt Jewish, even as a kid. I did not feel Jewish. I did not relate to it as a religion. It just turned me off. It didn't make sense. I don't believe in God. I didn't get it. Now, that's not true for other people in my family. Always a little different or very different. And when I was in high school, the end of my high school years, I met a young guy that was my age, and he had learned to meditate in transcendental meditation, which is what the Beatles brought to America, right? With Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in the late 60s and early 70s. And this was 1972 for me. I graduated high school, and he was meditating, and he was my boyfriend. So I said, and he invited me. So I said, oh, okay, that seems kind of cool. I'll go. Yeah. And so I went, and I just felt like I came home. It was just the thing. And so I did that for 25 years, twice a day, every day. Read other things and got involved in other kinds of things, and found people that I respected who were into Buddhism, read some books, went to some teachings, and then found that that was really my path. Because even though I was doing transcendental meditation, I did not become a Hindu. I didn't get into the religious part. I just meditated. But Buddhism as a tradition and as a way of living and thinking and being really works for me. It is definitely my spiritual home and the way I want to live. It's definitely not the first time I'm doing this, which is the other belief that a lot of Buddhists share about coming back more than one time. And lots of Jews must have been together or in Buddhist communities before this generation. For so many of us to be leaders and longtime practitioners this time around, we had to have done this before, is our thinking.
That makes a lot of sense.
Maybe many times.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of collaboration in the African American and Jewish community as well. And some of that cuts through into Buddhism. And so I'm very interested in that, because Buddhism, of course, is the main principle is do no harm, nonviolence. And so that is a very big need, obviously, around the world. but particularly here in St. Louis, there have been a lot of reconciliation and discussion kinds of things along the model of what Thich Nhat Hanh did with Vietnamese people and the veterans after the end of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
If you know who Thich Nhat Hanh is, he's a Buddhist teacher in a different tradition that's a little bit like Tibetan, but not exactly. It's called Theravadan.
Okay.
And so they have needed a lot of healing, obviously.
Yeah.
Between the people who waged war on their people and in their country for no good reason and polluted it and poisoned it and just did horrific things. Still finding landmines in Vietnamese places, by the way. All these meetings of reconciliation and discussion. And so now that Rabbi Susan Talve, who's the Central Reform Congregation in Middle St. Louis, and a lot of other African leaders and Jewish leaders have been coming together now since of Michael Brown and all the protests and things since the verdicts came in. And so I think that's really great. Yeah,
that's really great. And I've always seen kind of like a kindred spirit between people of the Jewish faith and Jews. I guess, can you explain what the difference between like the Jewish faith and being a Jew is, or is there a difference? Or like,
yeah, it's a good question. Well, because of Hitler, really, and because of a lot of other things, communism among them, there are lots of Jews who consider themselves secular Jews, which means we are culturally Jewish. We enjoy the fact that our backgrounds are Jewish, our families are Jewish, we eat Jewish food or may celebrate some Jewish holidays or have a lot of Jewish characteristics and values, but we are not religious. Many of us are atheists or have other traditions, spiritual practices that we follow or don't do anything. And so secular Jews is a very big thing since the early 1900s, really, and has a whole movement in countries for it. Some of us who are Buddhists would certainly not consider ourselves not Jewish, but we're not religious. We're not what they call observant.
So yeah, I'd say that there's a kindred spirit between Jewish people and African Americans or Black people just because of the history of oppression.
Slavery.
Yeah, and I see that there are a lot of Ethiopian Jews in St. Louis. I'm not sure if that is an abnormality, whether across like major cities or whatever, but I hear there's a large population of Ethiopian Jews here too.
There are Ethiopian Jews, there are Yemenite Jews, there are Jews from Eritrea, there are Jews from a lot of different places that don't look white. And people are always surprised about that because they have this concept of Eastern European Jews as being the only Jews they've ever met.
Yeah.
But really, many of us look exactly like Muslims, for one thing, because we're from the Middle East. And then if we're from African countries, there are Chinese Jews. There are Jews from India. The diaspora of Jews really existed for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. Jews have been around for almost 6,000 years. We kept getting thrown out of places. So we ended up everywhere. Marry or have children with people that looked the way that those people looked where we ended up, and then that's how we look like everybody.
I guess that's the same thing is kind of happening to people of African descent. So like we're in every country around the world and marrying different people that look differently, and it's interesting.
But you want to hear a really cool biological thing, since you're a scientist, that I found out about 20 years ago?
Yeah.
The people indigenous to Australia that are sometimes called Aborigines by other people, different physiological composition in their phenotype, which is the way they look. So that anytime they intermarry and have children, their physical characteristics become recessive. They stop looking Black. They stop having curly hair. They stop having the broad nose, and it yields to whatever the other characteristics are. Whereas the Black people who came from Africa have the opposite phenotype. They have dominance. So that when an African mates with somebody who isn't African, a lot of the African traits are going to dominate. So you look at Barack Obama, but he is half white by anybody's standard. Look like that because his father was from Africa, and those traits dominate. But if you look at a lot of people in Australia or people who came from mixed backgrounds in Australia, they look more like Europeans.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Or Asians or Middle Easterns or whatever the mix was with the native people of Australia. It is very weird.
Yeah. Genetics.
Well, meanwhile, what's also very weird is I missed my calling here as somebody who should keep better time, because it's only 10 minutes before the hour and I haven't asked you the big question that I have to ask you, and I have to give you at least 5 minutes to talk about it. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
For the changes question that I ask everybody.
Let's do it.
Given all the local, personal, regional, statewide, national, global, political, social, technological, scientific, environmental, artistic, and any other kind of changes you're aware of, arousing you hope, which ones evoke fear, and what are the ones you want to talk about in your 5 minutes here? Take it away, Darian Wigfall.
Sure. There's a lot of things that I've seen over the years since I've been out of school that fall into those categories. And I guess I'll start with the social stuff because that's the things that I'm closest to. But after the death of Mike Brown, there were a lot of programs that were started or created for kids. And I actually started a group called Artists as Tutors with my business partner, Damon Davis, and a theater teacher from SLU named Shannara Gabriel. And it ran for 2 years. It ran up until this summer. But now the Delwood Rec Center is where we ran it, and their director is going to run it from here on out. But so things like that give me hope. But the fact that prisons have actuarial tables charting kids from 3rd grade through, I guess, 18 when they become eligible to go into the real prisons really strikes fear in me. And you were talking about Michael Moore's book, but then there's also Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and seeing how Supreme Court decisions have made it nearly impossible to sue or to get a case dismissed on the basis of race really scares me. Because I asked, so in the protest, there was a man named Reverend Osajifo Sekou, and he was arrested for what he calls praying in the street. Basically, he was on the clergy line in between the police and the protesters. And so he was praying and wouldn't move, and so they arrested him. And his lawyer, Jailed Christmas, was on a panel with a bunch of other lawyers. I think that was February. Yeah, it was February for Black History Month at U City High School. And I asked him, you know, given the Supreme Court decisions that basically make it impossible to sue on that basis, do you see any way back so that there is a recourse for somebody to say that I was discriminated against and this person should be prosecuted on that basis? And he said that legally no, but he hopes that the activists now are changing the hearts and minds of people, and that's really the thing that's going to make the most difference. Is like, if people feel like they value my life the same as theirs, and I look black and they look white, then we're in a situation where the legislature, if they get elected, or if they become a lawyer, or if they become a teacher or a principal of a school, that they'll create policy that is more equitable for all people. And so books like mine and books like yours that kind of explore those social constructs in ways that don't ignite a fire in people, that kind of make them think before they get angry or before they get sad or whatever emotion would be invoked, then I think that also gives me hope. So there's kind of a balance of hope and fear with all those things, because like technology is getting crazy, and the way that you can bully people on social media and like be relatively anonymous. Of course, your name and your IP address is attached to it, but who's gonna really come to your house and confront you about it? So like the fact that people can use social media to be cruel and to demean people also gives me some fear, because like it's only going to get worse. There's only going to be more social media platforms, and they're going to be more targeted and things like that. But I see a lot of kids these days that are focused on social justice and changing the world for the better, making LGBTQ rights a bigger factor, and making racism a non-factor and things like that. And these are kids that are like 10, 11, 12 years old. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future. But I hope that they find mentors that, I guess, cultivate that idea and those thoughts in them, because if they grow up and are jaded just like most of the other adults in society, we're just going to keep repeating the same pattern. So there's things that give me hope within the technology and social justice and things like that, but there's still a lot of fear out there. So I guess I kind of take a balanced look at things like that.
Thank you. I think that was really a lot of good topics you brought up, and I hope people will pay attention to this. The ones who didn't get to see us live, I hope you'll comment, leave questions. Make sure you put my name or Darian's name in your comment or question. Ping us is what that's called. Make sure you spell out Sally Sue Ember if it's for Google+, or Darian Wigfall if it's for either Google+ or YouTube. And then you can get a response from one of us. And you can also contact us. I'm at Sally Ember, LLYEMBER.com. You can find the Spanish series books, reviews, covers. You can find all of the information on how to look at all the other episodes of the Changes Authors series, or if you are an author of any type of book, whatever, indie author, self-published, or indie author small press or big press, I do not discriminate. If you have a book out or more than one, if you write poetry, plays, nonfiction, I'm all up for it. And you can find out on my Changes tab of my website how to come on the show. I want to thank you, Darian, for coming on today, and tell us what's coming up for you and how to reach you.
What's coming up for me, the most immediate thing is I have an art opening at the Kransberg Arts Center that's at Olive and Grand in the Big Brothers Big Sisters building, and that is going to be dealing with oppression, kind of like hidden messages that oppressed people will receive from the oppressor but then adopt for themselves. And so that should be interesting. That'll be Friday, June 3rd.
How long is that running?
It will be up in the center all month. So like the opening is Friday, but it will be through the first Friday in July. So like it'll come down maybe July 1st or something like that.
Please take a minute when we're done and go to our event page and put up any information you can so people can find that and follow and go visit your display. That's great. That exhibit sounds interesting. And what about the Murmuration Festival? Can you put up information about that as well?
I'll post a link there, and it's not just panel discussions, it's music and technology and all kinds of stuff. So there's something there for everybody. I really actually am excited for this.
Great. And then you have a book coming out, Not So Princess Jasmine, sometime in the next 6 to 8 weeks. We'll be able to pre-order it, right?
Yep, that's right. The pre-order site should be up by the end of June for everybody. If you're one of my influencers, you're going to get a copy in a PDF form here pretty soon, so I can get a comment from you or a review. And like you said, the book's called Not So Princess Jasmine. I just got a grant from the Regional Arts Commission to produce that. And so with that grant, I alluded to the fact that I'd like to start writing workshops for kids, because I think telling your story can be very therapeutic and very cathartic. Excellent. And a way to kind of like figure out what you're thinking yourself. Sometimes you don't even know what's in your own mind until you write it out. So I'm going to be working hopefully with the St. Louis Public Schools to start a series of writing workshops behind the Not So Princess Jasmine release, so that we can teach girls first, but then teach everybody as well.
Fabulous. Oh, that's very exciting. And people can find you on brightlightsseries.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also on Goodreads and Facebook and Twitter. And where else do you want people to find you?
I'm also on Instagram as well, at Bright Light Series. And yeah, I think that's it. I do social media, but it gets to be a little bit much for me sometimes. So
I know, you have to spend time writing. You have to write.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have to end soon, so I want to thank everybody now and later for watching, commenting, asking questions, going and looking at our books, buying them, or getting the free download of my first ebook, This Changes Everything, or looking at whatever deals you can that Darian's going to be doing with the release of his second book, and tell people about us and these shows, and anything else you think sparked some interest in your life, go follow it up. And as I say at the end of everything, with your changes. Bye.
Bye.